the warning is clear and concerning. Americans could soon face the grim reality of empty store shelves. Representatives from major retailers like Walmart, Target, and Home Depot didn't mince words when briefing the U.S. president on the critical state of the supply chain. Cargo shipments from China to the U.S., a primary source for countless goods, have plummeted by 35% compared to the same period last year. This steep decline has left a gaping hole in inventory pipelines that businesses heavily rely on to stock their shelves. The situation is made worse by escalating tariffs, which have created a stranglehold on trade. The lack of meaningful trade agreements not only stifles the flow of goods, but also places immense financial pressure on businesses already struggling to cope with rising costs. These trade barriers trickle down to the consumer, who ultimately pays the price, literally and figuratively. Basic necessities, holiday items, and even essential household goods could all be off limits due to unavoidable shortages. Retailers have sounded the alarm, warning it could take as little as 2 weeks before signs of depletion start to show in stores nationwide. Once shelves begin to empty, the industry will face another challenge: panic buying. It's a vicious cycle. Consumers will undoubtedly rush to stockpile whatever remains, exacerbating the problem to the point of no return. The message here is blunt and unignorable. This is a crisis with real consequences, and it needs action now. Measures must be taken to ease trade restrictions, expedite shipping logistics, and tackle bottlenecks head-on. Without swift and decisive action, families across America could be staring at barren aisles right as they head into the holiday season. The clock is ticking, and this isn't an issue that can be kicked down the road anymore. Prepare for impact, because these empty shelves are just around the corner. 1. Impact of tariffs on supply chains. The impact of tariffs on global supply chains cannot be overstated, and Walmart's recent warning about potential empty shelves serves as a stark reality check. These tariffs, spanning goods from China, Canada, and Mexico, are not just adding incremental costs. They are fundamentally disrupting the flow of goods and creating severe bottlenecks in a supply chain already stretched thin by the pandemic and geopolitical tensions. Key products, from essential groceries to electronics, are being affected, leaving suppliers and retailers struggling to keep shelves stocked. Walmart, like many other retail giants, relies heavily on global supply chains to maintain its inventory and competitive pricing. The increased costs due to tariffs have forced suppliers to pass on the financial burden to retailers and, ultimately, consumers. Take the de minimis tariff on shipments under $800, 0 cents, as an example. Often overlooked, this tariff creates an additional financial strain on smaller-scale shipments, compounding logistical challenges. What this means in practical terms is higher prices at the checkout counter and growing frustration for customers who are accustomed to finding affordable goods on Walmart's shelves. China, as one of the most significant players in global manufacturing, has been a particular focus of these tariffs. The U.S.-China trade war has not only increased the cost of importing goods, but has also disrupted long-standing trade relationships. For industries relying on electronics and consumer goods, products in high demand at Walmart and other similar retailers, this has led to delays, increased prices, and destabilized inventory systems. Adding insult to injury, China is actively striking trade agreements with other countries, strategically bypassing the U.S. as a reliable trade partner. This leaves American retailers at an even greater disadvantage, as they scramble to find alternative sources that can meet both cost and demand requirements. The cascading effect of these tariffs also extends to upstream supply chain processes. Manufacturers are being hit with increased raw material costs, leading to production delays or interruptions. This bottleneck further intensifies pressure on downstream players, including shipping and logistics providers. Walmart's ability to ensure steady inventory levels has become a near impossible task. Products meant to fill shelves are now stuck at ports or delayed due to lengthy trade negotiations and logistical slowdowns, driven in part by the ripple effects of these tariffs. Despite the growing warning signals, no significant progress has been made on trade deals, particularly with countries in Asia. The ongoing stalemate between the U.S. and China continues to block pathways toward stabilizing trade. Without finalized agreements or effective efforts to de-escalate tensions, the supply chain chaos looks to remain an issue well into the foreseeable future. China's ability to secure alternative trade arrangements adds further complications, creating a competitive edge for other nations and isolating U.S. retailers even further. The bottom line is simple but grim. Tariffs are choking supply chains at every possible juncture. Walmart's warning of empty shelves in 2 weeks isn't an exaggeration. It's a looming reality. Without immediate and decisive action to address these trade and tariff issues, retailers will face sharp inventory shortages, and customers will bear the brunt, either with empty shelves or skyrocketing prices. For shoppers, the days of low-cost convenience may be over. And for Walmart, these challenges threaten its position as the go-to store for affordable and accessible goods. 2. Shifting trade routes and global alliances. The global trade landscape is undergoing monumental shifts, and it's clear that the United States is losing its grip on economic influence. While China aggressively strengthens its trade partnerships with nations like Japan, South Korea, and Brazil, the U.S. is left out of the picture. This exclusion is not by accident. It's the direct result of short-sighted tariff policies and a refusal to engage in meaningful trade agreements. Meanwhile, key Southeast Asian nations such as Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam are becoming the focal points for trade, capturing the benefits of redirected global supply chains. China's trade strategy is nothing short of strategic warfare. The signing of new agreements and its increasing collaboration with Mexico, where some ports have seen a staggering 200% rise in container traffic, underscore its success in boxing out the U.S. from critical trade routes. Once dominant American trade hubs are seeing fewer shipments, while ports across Asia and Latin America are booming. These changes aren't temporary, they are long-term realignments that put the U.S. on the sidelines. If this continues, America risks becoming irrelevant in the global economy, a hard pill to swallow for a country that once set the rules of trade. For American businesses and consumers, the consequences are dire. Empty shelves at Walmart and other major retailers could soon become the new normal. The goods Americans are accustomed to, everything from electronics to daily essentials, are now caught in a web of increasing supply chain inefficiencies. While China and its allies benefit from robust trade ecosystems, the U.S. is facing bottlenecks, longer lead times, and skyrocketing costs. This isn't just about global politics, it directly impacts what Americans can buy, how quickly they can get it, and how much it will cost them. The broader issue lies in the failure of the U.S. to adapt to changing trade dynamics. Instead of competing, the U.S. is isolating itself, making it harder for American businesses to source products and participate in global markets. The longer this continues, the worse the fallout will be for consumers, businesses, and the economy as a whole. Time is running out for the U.S. to recalibrate its trade policies. Without urgent action, the warning from Walmart, empty shelves in 2 weeks, might just be the first of many ominous signs to come. 3. Product scarcity and price increases. The warning signs are clear and the consequences are imminent. Empty shelves, akin to the COVID panic buying days, are just around the corner. Major retailers like Walmart and Amazon have already started slashing orders from Chinese suppliers. Why? Skyrocketing tariffs have made it outright impossible to sustain previous order levels while remaining profitable. The ripple effect of these decisions is set to hit consumers hard in a matter of days. Imported goods, raw materials, and key manufacturing components are where the cracks will be the most visible. Retailers simply cannot absorb the increased costs tied to tariffs and logistical challenges. This means that if you rely on imported products for everyday use, you might want to brace yourself. Items once taken for granted could become scarce, and as availability dwindles, prices will inevitably climb. The concept is simple. When supply sinks and demand remains, price increases are unavoidable. But this isn't just limited to niche fancy items. Everyday essentials, including basic household goods and components used in a variety of products, are expected to follow the same path. When these shelves empty out, finding alternatives will also pose a challenge, since domestic production hasn't caught up to fill the gaps left by reduced imports. Meanwhile, raw material shortages will send shockwaves across multiple industries, impacting production timelines, increasing backlogs, and stretching supply chains to their breaking points. Retailers have been upfront about the issues looming ahead, but that doesn't make the reality any easier to swallow. For consumers, delays and higher costs will become the frustrating norm. Shopping habits will have to shift, buying in bulk may return, and prioritizing essentials over non-essentials could become part of day-to-day life again. At the end of the day, it's the average shopper who bears the brunt of these economic stressors. Whether it's impatiently waiting for restocks or paying a premium for items that used to come cheap, the message is clear. Product scarcity and price hikes aren't just possibilities anymore, they're certainties. And unless systemic solutions are implemented quickly, this isn't going to be a temporary inconvenience. It's a reality we're all going to have to face. 4. Decline of the U.S. dollar and global influence. The dominance of the U.S. dollar is facing an unprecedented crisis. Decades of over-reliance on its status as the global reserve currency have created a sense of false security, but the cracks have become too glaring to ignore. A combination of erratic trade policies, a sluggish economic recovery, and intensifying political dysfunction has directly contributed to its sharp decline. The dollar is no longer the unchallenged king of global currencies. Nations and alliances worldwide are exploring alternatives, turning the tide against U.S. economic hegemony. Adding fuel to the fire is the recent warning from Walmart, a bellwether of American retail. The company bluntly stated that supply chain disruptions combined with ongoing inflationary pressures could lead to empty shelves within 2 weeks. This stark warning underscores the fragility of both the domestic U.S. economy and its global supply networks. Walmart's reliance on imports, particularly from markets now aligning with BRICS nations, highlights how the weakening dollar hurts not just the United States, but also its ability to maintain critical trade relationships. Globally, we are seeing efforts to dethrone the dollar gather momentum. The BRICS expansion is a pointed example. By representing nearly half of the world's population and over 40% of global GDP, this alliance is actively working toward creating an alternative currency system and reducing dependence on the U.S. financial order. If these efforts succeed, the dollar's relevance on the global stage may diminish faster than anticipated. Meanwhile, nations like China and Russia are leading the charge, executing bilateral trade agreements in local currencies. The domino effect from these moves will unavoidably undermine American influence. Make no mistake, the warning signs are clear. Declining trust in the dollar's value and domestic economic instability erode the United States' leverage over global markets. If major retailers like Walmart are already waving red flags, it's not just a wake-up call, it's an alarm. Empty shelves could mark the beginning of widespread economic turbulence, and without decisive action, the dollar may slip further as the backbone of international commerce. The U.S. is at a crossroads, and the era of taking the dollar's supremacy for granted is rapidly coming to an end. 5. Preparedness recommendations. Walmart's warning about potential empty shelves in 2 weeks is a wake-up call to take immediate, practical action. Time is limited, and preparedness is non-negotiable. Here's how to ensure you and your family can weather potential shortages with minimal disruption. Steps to take. First, audit your current inventory at home. Take stock of what you already have: pantry essentials, medical supplies, tools, and household items, and identify gaps. Prioritize stocking up on essential goods, especially those that are imported or hard to replace. Items like grains, canned foods, medication, and hygiene products should be at the top of the list. Focus on durable goods like car parts, electronics, tools, and clothing, things that may become increasingly difficult to obtain as the supply chain struggles worsen. Sourcing locally is critical. Farmers markets, regional producers, and independent retailers tend to rely less on national supply chains, so they may have inventory longer than big-box stores like Walmart. Build relationships with local suppliers now, as they might become your lifeline if larger suppliers fail to restock shelves. Bulk purchasing and forward planning are no longer optional, they're essential. If you rely on specific items for medical conditions, daily routines, or specific chores, secure extra supplies immediately. Waiting until shortages are visible means you'll be fighting for scraps. Mindset. Panic is not helpful, but neither is complacency. Adopting a proactive and strategic mindset is the best defense against this looming crisis. Plan your purchases with a focus on necessity, not luxury, and stick to a list. Prioritize what matters most to your household's survival and stability. Now is not the time for wasteful spending on non-essentials. Stay calm but realistic. Recognize the situation for what it is, a major disruption that requires adjustment. It's likely this is not just a short-term blip, but part of a broader, more concerning trend. Adjust your habits now to live with less waste and more efficiency. These shortages will test everyone's ability to adapt. Those who prepare smartly, take action early, and remain level-headed will minimize disruption to their lives. Don't dismiss Walmart's warning. Act decisively now to secure your future. The shelves might be empty in 2 weeks, but you don't have to be unprepared. 6. Food safety concerns. The challenge of food safety in the current system cannot be overstated. Recent breakdowns, like the E. coli outbreak caused by contaminated romaine lettuce, have exposed glaring vulnerabilities in the supply chain. This isn't just about occasional mistakes, it's about a system that repeatedly fails to adequately protect consumers from harmful contaminants. And major retailers, including Walmart, are feeling the impact. When one contamination spreads across 15 states, affecting countless people, it's a wake-up call that something fundamentally broken is being overlooked. The situation grows worse when accountability is absent. The FDA's decision to close the investigation into the E. coli outbreak without identifying the responsible growers or producers is a slap in the face to public trust. This isn't a question of resources, it's a question of priorities. Food safety inspections are falling through the cracks as major companies and regulatory bodies shuffle blame or choose secrecy over transparency. These failures highlight critical weaknesses in a system too dependent on massive networks and opaque practices. Consumers are left guessing and, in many cases, paying the price with their health. Walmart's warning about empty shelves within 2 weeks compounds the urgency of addressing food safety. When supply chains are stretched thin and unreliable, safety precautions take a back seat to keeping shelves stocked. Large-scale production prioritizes volume over quality control, and the risk of contamination increases. Add to that the shipping, handling, and packaging of food products across extensive distances, and it's clear why food safety is under threat. The longer these supply chains are, the more room for error exists. For example, a single contamination at a farm or factory can ripple through the network and affect thousands. These risks just aren't acceptable when it comes to the food people rely on every day. The solution is clear, though it won't come easily. Rethinking the entire process from farm to store is non-negotiable. Walmart and other large retailers must take a hard look at their sourcing, transportation, and inspection protocols. Dependence on centralized or international supply chains must decrease in favor of local sourcing, which inherently boosts both safety and freshness. Cutting supply distances doesn't just improve oversight, it limits the spread of any potential problems by isolating them before they can wreak havoc on a national scale. For consumers, the message is stark. The time to act is now. Stockpiling food is no longer a suggestion, it's a necessity. A system plagued by frequent recalls, contamination, and a lack of accountability cannot be trusted to sustain the average household without interruption. By creating personal reserves of long-lasting staples and prioritizing transparency in purchasing decisions, individuals can protect themselves, even when large retailers and government agencies fail to do so. The modern food system is teetering on the edge of collapse. Between empty shelves and ongoing outbreaks, Walmart's warning about the fragility of supply chains should sound the alarm for everyone. Food safety must be a top priority, not an afterthought. And the time to demand change, both from corporations and regulatory bodies, is long overdue. 7. U.S. retreat from global diplomacy. The United States is steadily pulling back from its leadership role in international diplomacy, and the consequences are glaring. Once the world's foremost mediator and power broker, the U.S. now finds itself outpaced and outmaneuvered by rising powers like China and Russia. This retreat from global involvement is not just weakening America's influence, it's creating ripple effects that threaten global stability and America's own interests. The implications are stark, and the cracks in the foundation are already showing. This decline in diplomatic engagement is largely self-inflicted. Dwindling foreign policy initiatives and a focus on domestic polarization have left a leadership vacuum that other countries are keen to exploit. China has been quick to fill the gaps, reorienting global supply chains, expanding trade agreements, and solidifying alliances through mechanisms like the Belt and Road Initiative. Meanwhile, Russia, unperturbed by sanctions and international criticism, is doubling down on its partnerships and energy dominance. The U.S., on the other hand, is quickly losing its status as the queen on the geopolitical chessboard. The direct fallout of this retreat is visible in disrupted trade relations. Long-standing economic partnerships are fracturing, as countries increasingly look towards alternatives like China for trade and investment opportunities. This change is more than symbolic. It's a reshaping of where global power lies. Traditional U.S. allies are grappling with this shift by forging their own bilateral agreements, often at the expense of obligations to the U.S. economy. Walmart's warning of empty shelves within 2 weeks is not just a logistical challenge, it's a symptom of a bigger problem. If critical trading partners deprioritize the U.S. shortages, delays and price hikes will become the new normal. Food insecurity is another consequence of this diplomatic decline. Many foods imported to the U.S. rely on intricate global networks, and disruptions at the geopolitical level, such as rising tensions between Europe and Russia or competition over energy supplies, filter down to affect American consumers. Energy reliance and sanctions further muddy the waters as countries prioritize deals that exclude the U.S. to gain leverage in a complicated global landscape. American households will bear the burden of these unilateral policies when their grocery store shelves suddenly reflect the harsh realities of a supply chain in crisis. Yet the most alarming consequence of this retreat is perhaps the loss of leverage on critical issues that demand coordinated global action. From climate change to public health and nuclear proliferation, stepping back from diplomatic tables places the U.S. in a precarious position, where it can no longer drive agendas or defend its interests. New alliances and power blocs are being formed as China and Russia aggressively stake out influence, leaving the U.S. increasingly isolated on crucial global decisions. What's worse, the U.S. seems unprepared to handle these evolving challenges. The continual pivot inward ignores the realities of an interconnected world. Solely prioritizing domestic concerns without addressing external threats risks both economic stability and national security. Walmart's warnings, dire as they sound, capture only a slice of this scenario. The real cost of U.S. diplomatic retreat is far greater. It's the erosion of America's position as a global leader. At this rate, if the U.S. doesn't quickly recalibrate, it won't just lose its shelves, it'll lose its seat at the table. The clock is ticking. 8. Encouragement for self-reliance. Relying on massive supply chains is a gamble we can no longer afford to take. Companies like Walmart, despite their size and influence, are sounding alarms about potential shortages. And if that isn't a wake-up call, what is? Empty shelves in 2 weeks? Can you imagine the scramble, the panic, the chaos? But here's the thing, it doesn't have to be your reality. If you start focusing on self-reliance now, you can avoid being part of the crowd dependent on systems that are crumbling under pressure. This isn't about achieving perfection overnight. It's about taking small, intentional steps that can make a huge difference. Begin with something simple, like stocking up on non-perishable food items, or learning essential survival skills. Every jar of canned goods you stash away, every skill you gain, whether it's starting a fire, growing basic crops, or purifying water, is another layer of stability you're adding to your future. Looted shelves won't bother you if your cabinets are full and your skills are sharp. Take it from someone who's been there. I've spent years slowly building a self-reliant lifestyle, and while it's not flashy, it works. Gardening, harvesting rainwater, raising chickens for eggs. These aren't just hobbies, they're shields against uncertainty. Sure, it takes work, but does the alternative sound better? Waiting in endless checkout lines or driving store to store looking for bare essentials as panic sets in doesn't feel like much of a choice. Stop underestimating the value of being prepared. Don't wait for despair to creep in before you take this seriously. Complacency is the greatest threat you face right now, not just the empty shelves, but the mindset that it won't happen to you. Guess what? It could, and when it does, the ones who took steps towards self-reliance will be the ones weathering the storm while others scramble for solutions they didn't bother to think about before it was too late. The future favors those who prepare. Start small if you have to. Stock your shelves. Plant a single tomato seed. Join a community of like-minded individuals, but for the love of your future, take action. Time won't wait, and the signals are already screaming at you. Get ready. Stop relying on systems that are breaking apart. Start relying on yourself.